Okay, so a bunch, just my setup is a little different. So there's a little bit of uh, reorientation to do. I managed to tilt the camera and then lift it a bit, and now it feels like I'm looking up to look at the camera. Um, so from yesterday's video, from working through yesterday, I feel like I was able to articulate something particularly well, and um, that's a property of how it's organized in my mind. Like as something becomes clearer to me, I'm able to describe it more precisely. I hadn't gone into yesterday thinking I'm going to talk about what I think the law of karma should be. This is more like um, just trying to express this thing about how to capture the lessons of aging and death without having to go through aging and death first. Recognizing that, from my point of view, bringing culture to a point where we can grow past that. Like, well, what is it like? But what would I be? Who would I be in interaction with a culture like that? Oh, I would be somebody who had personally made this choice of integrating the wisdom of aging and death. So rather than talking about what others should do, how about I focus on what I can do? Because that's the point that I seem to be able to do some action. But as I reflected on this, I've been reflecting on that particular issue for a long time. But clarifying it the way I did yesterday helped to bring in something much more precise about a question that I do not have an answer to. This centers around a question of choice. What does it mean to choose something? I don't mean this as an intellectual exercise of, is there free will? Well, according to physics, the answer is clearly no. And, well, we have to step beyond the physics model. Maybe there is free will, but like, what would that even mean? Does it interact with physics in a way physics could detect? And blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I actually just don't care. That's not the interesting question. I mean, it is an interesting question, but that's not the focus of where I'm looking here. This is a very practical thing, in my experience. And unsurprisingly, as I focus on this, I'm noticing more elements of that aspect of this specific challenge showing up in what I'm hearing from other people, from other sources. I recently listened to a podcast by Bentino Massaro, who is a kind of non-duality teacher, who articulated exactly, oh yeah, people are going to go through this kind of challenge, and the resolution is you learn to deal with it. It's like, okay, great. Even if he's right, I'm not sure what that does for me other than just to say, wait and see what happens. So this challenge, I described some of this in the text, giving some outline about here's what the video is about. There's a very clear thing that seems to me like a deep confusion about what it means to bring in intention or will or choice. It's just part of the culture, just ubiquitous everywhere. Like, well, why don't you just get a job? What do you mean, why don't you just get a job? Like, there are reasons. But the question is not, well, what keeps you from getting a job? Like that's a sincere curiosity. Like, well, you're not getting a job, whoever you are, fictional person I just invented for the sake of this example. So like, what is preventing you from getting a job? Because when I hear you, it looks to me like you going out and getting a job actually solves the problems that you're describing. But I notice you're not doing that. Is it that you just didn't think of it, is is there some other thing that's preventing you from taking that action? Like, what's going on? And to me, that's a sincere curiosity. I'm like, okay, I notice I am ignorant about this situation. Can you explain? Can you help me understand? But that's often not what that kind of phrase is meant. Well, why don't you get a job? It's like, well, it seems to me obvious the answer is to get a job, so let me put in some pressure. Oh, you're kind of like you need this boost of energy, right? Maybe you need a bit of extra shame or something, or maybe you just need the encouragement of a friend. You should get a job. If that were systematically strategic, which like, pick up all kinds of funny language from California. If that were something that people reliably did as, okay, let me be of support to this person, then I could see that as a, a system of interaction, a kindness. And that kind of pressure is something like, well, I wasn't getting a job because I felt tired and it seemed exhausting, and you doing this gives me energy and a bit of support, and that's what I was lacking. Okay, cool, now I can go do this. But much more often, it seems sort of like just trying to make reality be different by wanting at it or demanding at it. That's the part that I'm looking at going, okay, there's something really confused here about what will and intention is even for or about or how it works. I think this is much more obvious if you look at when adults, particularly parents, scold a child saying, why can't you be good? Or you should be good. I don't know, to a 4-year-old, does that even make any sense? Be good. That translates to something like, do things that the adults like and not things they don't like. Okay, so what are the things the adults like? It's like sometimes they get mad even if you try to follow the instructions they give you. I'm like, sometimes they really like it when you surprise them. Like, how does this work? Like, it's very baffling. So like that instruction, be good, is as though the kid is just like choosing between two buttons. Am I going to push the be good button or the other button? Which one should I pick? And the parents informing them, push the button, push the good button. Like, right? So if that were literally the physical situation, I could understand that kind of pressure. Although I think it's the same mistake even in that situation. But hey, Ian. Yes, the shame shaping. Yeah. So in but the thing is that the kid doesn't typically have a button like that. They don't have just a be good button. That makes no sense. And I claim that something very similar is happening for the person who is struggling with their life situation. They're feeling worn out by the systems that they've been dealing with, maybe feeling kind of depressed, and they don't have a get a job button. So asking, well, why don't you get a job? Is like, if it's actually a suggestion that they hadn't thought of, that might be helpful. But the question isn't, well, have you considered getting a job? Oh, okay. So if you haven't, does that solve your problem? Or, oh, you have. Okay, well, what makes that not work for you? Right? It's not that kind of question. There's some sort of use your magic willpower to push the get a job button. Go forth and get a job. Oh, you can't? Well, what if I shame you more? What if I look at you with a, oh, I am disapproving of you? Like, this is not conscious, but it's so obvious. Once the pattern is there, like, it just stands out to me. It is extremely clear once this occurred to me. So, and this is not unique to individual interactions. Oh, the government should just send out a stimulus check. The government should have, and this is particularly great when we talk about what the government should have done in the past. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, it didn't, so obviously it couldn't. So what do you mean it should have? Oh, this is going to help us model what we should do in the future. Yeah, but what effect do you actually have on what the government does? But you look at things like, and I get pulled into this too, thinking about, when I look at, okay, what a sane government that was being compassionate for the whole system might have done, or might have at least considered, is when it became clear that there was a pandemic and there was a need to pull people out of workplaces, to put a freeze on everything having to do with collecting interest and everything having to do with making anything that looks like a rent payment. The reason for eliminating interest is because, yeah, this is going to delay the effect of anything like nest eggs or benefit from investment. But it also means that there won't be collection on things like credit card debt and building of interest on student loans or on mortgages. And by putting a freeze on no collecting on mortgages, no collecting on rent, means that landlords and the tenants wouldn't have anything to deal with. There would just be, okay, We can now just put a pause on the movement of money for people to exist, and all we need to deal with now is food. There's a question of power dynamics. This is complicated. I don't mean to say that this is a solution. What I'm pointing out is that there's this way that my mind goes through, oh, they, like, my wondering went from, oh, how does this modeling work? What would that have done to the system? There's this that happens in me that goes towards something like, they should have done this. Or why didn't they do this? This was stupid of them. It's obvious. And I get into this like when I'm having chats with my parents about this stuff. It's like yes, these people are stupid, and here's this conspiracy theory, and people are being ridiculous all over the place, and clearly this is going on, but not that we know anything. And there's this this itch of, yes, these stupid people, they should be doing this, but I don't know anything about their life context. I don't know what is going on with the federal government such that this model of freezing interest, freezing anything that looks like rent, just saying, well, we're putting a pause on this while we deal with an actual biological emergency. I don't know why they couldn't do that. Maybe it's because they're bad, although that's not really an explanation. That doesn't actually say anything. What does they are bad mean? They're corrupt, which is that another word for bad? Like, what does that mean? Like, what are these phrases saying? They're in, like, maybe they are influenced by corporations. Yeah, but if there's a tone of, and they shouldn't be, there's a question of, well, if they shouldn't be, then why are they? Right? Because they are influenced, so presumably there is a flow of power that causes that influence. So presumably there's some sort of problem of, like, it's a systematic thing. It's a systemic thing. How would they act differently given that they are in the pockets of corporations, if that's the cause? Like, so there's all of this stuff of, when bringing in these judgments and assertions about how things should be different, or how people should have acted, or how institutions should have acted, or should act going forward, what kind of policies we need to put forward, there's this kind of strange disconnect that's happening about, what the hell is this button? What is this be good button? And what are, like, why are, like, what is the context that causes the current behavior? And how does that frame, and how does the saying, just push the be good button, how does that even interact with the context? How does that solve anything? I posit almost all the time it doesn't for anyone anywhere. It actually creates more suffering. It creates more confusion, because it gives the impression of, if you get enough people together screaming, push the be good button, push the be good button, that this is doing something, because that adds a pressure in a way that adds to this machine that creates change that sounds like some of the same words that are being demanded. I think this is basically how protests work. Protests aren't meaningfully addressing the reason why the protest was needed in the first place. I think maybe the clearest example of this is, this is not about protests, like people going out with signs, but it's a similar type of protesting. With all of this stuff going on, I mean, not so much now, because environmentalism sort of doesn't have time to breathe right now, but when you look at how much energy has gone into buy green products, pay attention to how you as a consumer are contributing to environmental problems or environmental solutions. What kind of way can you engage as a conscious consumer? The corporate response to this was not to become environmentally enlightened. I mean, most corporations did not go, actually, the environment actually is an important thing and we need to take care of this, so let's include this in our way of doing business. Most of them, the technical term for what they did is called greenwashing. They sort of paint what they're doing with a veneer as though they are caring about the environment. Right? So they'll literally put green on more of their labels to say, we care about the environment. Please recycle this plastic bottle. Thank you for caring for our planet Earth. As, like this is actually an advertising scheme. It's not an attempt to address the problems of that environmentalism are talking about. It is an attempt to look as though they are aligned with solving those problems so that they can appeal to people who want to do a sort of moral discharge about this. Oh, I'm buying the bottle that says eco-friendly because it has a smaller bottle cap on the top. Never mind the fact that it's still a plastic bottle. This is not actually helping a whole ton. And which, by the way, I want to emphasize that's not a should at all. There's no sense of anybody who's buying plastic bottles is wrong or bad. I'm just highlighting there's a delusion here. There's an outsourcing of responsibility. And that's just how it is. This is like the overall arc of what I'm staring at in terms of the content of this live stream. There's something of, when I look at what is, what we assert should be doesn't make a lot of sense from what I can tell. The way that we do it is incoherent. And this is a place where I'm willing to say we. Like, I include myself in this, and I look around and I see an ocean of culture that doesn't make sense on this particular axis. So the corporations do this greenwashing because it appeals to people who want to do moral discharging. It decreases the ability to be under fire from people who are championing the environmental rights stuff. And it also provides a little bit more leverage for them to mount something to make the environmental movements that threaten their profit margin look ridiculous and radical. Because, well, here we are making concessions, we're trying to adjust our products, we can't reasonably go beyond these bounds, but you people are demanding that we completely shut down an entire product line? How many people are we going to put out of work? What kind of damage is this going to do? You people are being ridiculous and unrealistic. We need to sell our plastic bottles of water. It doesn't make any sense. Right? But that's the kind of thing that keeps getting produced when there's just pressure. Where it's just do better. Push the do better button. Most of the time that's not viable. And when and it's much easier to build a button that says do good and then show people, hey, look at this button I'm pressing. I'm being good. It's exactly what you said I should be doing. Isn't that pleasant? That's the default thing that keeps happening over and over and over again at a large system level, which is, yeah, anyway, long rants I can go into there. I want to reel this back into terms of personal development. So when I'm looking at, so for today, actually, I started going through a bunch of, like after I gave my my bit yesterday about here's aging, here's how I see something you could reasonably call karma working, which is like the same type of thing as transgenerational trauma. I'm looking at that going, you know, I think there's a way where I have not been taking full responsibility for my own karmic weight, metaphorically speaking, of aging. I've been pointing at, like, we need to deal with this, but it's mostly been, you need to deal with this. I'm doing my job by pointing my finger and noticing, you know, that's been a lifelong thing for me. I've reeled it back a lot. I mostly don't lecture people about aging for the most part anymore. I probably talked a lot more about it in the last couple of days than I have in the prior, like, 3 years. But I noticed, you know, there's this energy in me, and I'm not properly dealing with it, not all the way. I can say the ideas of, okay, what about the desire for people to grow older and wiser? I can go, well, you don't mean the older part, but they kind of do. There's a social element. Like, I want to play a role, the role of the elder. And it's hard to play the role of the elder if I have a 20-year-old body. And I go, what's involved in that? And I notice I don't know. And in particular, I'm not embodying the kind of solution that would be a lived example of working through this karma so that I can be a vivid case study. A case study sounds very mental. So that people can feel what I'm talking about in terms of embodying having earned the end of aging. So I started looking at this going, okay, let me start writing some of these down and asking, how do I convert these? And I started to notice there's a really common theme across all of them. I think it could all be summarized as learning the lesson before it's forced. Right? So there's stuff like how in my, like over the last couple of days, my girlfriend and I have started really sorting out a dynamic between us that my side of it is something that I have been contributing to basically every romantic relationship I have ever had as far back as I can remember. Um, and the thing is that what got me to the point of going, no, we need to deal with this, was a degree of pain of noticing, like the way that it currently manifests for her and I won't go into a lot of personal details here, but just, but there is something about, for me, being in physical contact with my partner matters tremendously. She and I have been dating for over 3 years, and we've been long distance basically the whole time with occasional visits. I've been sort of waiting and hoping this magically resolves, which is on me. But there's this, like, well, how do I end up in a situation where that kind of physical contact is that important to me, and somehow I fall utterly in love with a woman who not only is long distance, but keeps having her own emotional and situational processing to do before she's ready to have us start talking seriously about how do we deal with international boundaries in order to be together. So she's French and usually lives in Canada. I live in the United States. This makes it kind of complicated for us to live together. So what I notice with this is that all of these components were there. And I kind of knew, there's something fishy here, but here's some reasonable things. Like, I know she's going through this, and like I can be supportive this way, and let me just digest this part, and yet, and here's this arc, and okay, here are going to be my limits. But there's a kind of thing of a degree of bullshit in myself about how I was contributing to a dynamic where we keep this sort of distance without really talking about it, without really digging into the roots and addressing it, that I had to hurt. There was something specific that had to happen. So, like, she had to bring up some things that really triggered me on this and had me go, oh, fuck, no, this is reminding me of pieces of how my marriage broke down. I had to feel that degree of pain and triggeredness in order to dig deep enough to decide, to choose, to hit the dig deep enough button. Like the be good button, I could hit the dig deep enough button to reach into the roots and start really pulling out this pattern that I want to be done with. So on the one hand, I can look at all of that and just go, cool, I have learned, I have received. There's this way in which everything that's good and bad that comes into my life is actually reality talking to me, showing me truth, because that's what reality is made of. And the question is, how clearly am I available to receive that message? If I am not clear, if I am not letting it through, if I've got too much up, if I do too much post-processing, to reference one of my previous videos, then reality, then to the degree that it matters, reality will keep building up more and more force until it manages to break through. And that, I think, is what I usually experience as suffering. And difficult circumstances that aren't matching how I want to navigate the world keep showing up. And I just want that to magically go away. Right? So Like, that's painful. And what I'm looking at, like, this becomes super obvious when I'm looking at this question of aging. Oh, how would our species deal with aging wisely? If we could actually cure aging wisely, what would be important for that? What would be a prerequisite? And one important prerequisite would be that all of the wisdom that we get from our bodies decaying while we're alive is something that we consciously choose to turn towards and learn. And I notice here I'm saying just push the choose to learn button, or maybe just push the learn button. And I swear there's something real there. But I'm also bumping into exactly the confusion that I was describing earlier. What would it have meant for me to choose to learn the lesson about this relationship dynamic without having to go through that much trigger and pain? I don't know. That's really disconcerting. What would it mean for me to decide to learn from my suffering before I suffer, if I can see it on the horizon? Okay. In this case, there's some degree of I couldn't exactly consciously see it on the horizon the way my conscious mind normally works, because the whole reason the problem and pattern is there was because of a way of blinding myself to, oh, well, we'll work it out. Oh, well, something will happen. Well, maybe this is okay for now, but like, I think she still, like, she wants to be together, maybe, but she's showing a lot of evidence that she's not. Let me not think about that too much. Let me not think about it. Let me forget. Let me not look at this too much. That's part of the mechanism, part of how that has run in me. So what does it mean? What does it really mean for me to see where it's going and choose? What is real choice? This is something I've been grappling with. And again, this is not about free will, not about the philosophy of free will. Oh, we live in a mechanical universe. Oh, that's nice that you know that, because I sure don't. But I recognize that within the physics model, there's no room for free will. Ignore the fact that this goes along with the fact that within the physics model, there's no room for conscious experience. So we'll ignore the question of how we even know about the physics model. But it turns out, for quirky reasons, there's actually a math theorem that says that there will always be a flaw like that in every perspective we build up, possibly including the one that let us conclude that. So the this the like this is not. I emphasize that because this is not about an abstract philosophical question of how is it that we ever choose anything? Maybe it's because there is some sort of magical energy of will. No, this is a lived thing. This is an actual lived thing. How do I know? Sorry, that's not how I want to ask that question. I don't care about how I know. If there's more bullshit in my relationship with my girlfriend, like that we started really cutting through beautifully in the last couple of days, I want to cut through it now. So how does that desire, something, to some relevant extent, it feels like almost like a will to die. How do I let, like, as though I'm a tree in the late fall, letting go of my leaves. How do I let the leaves go? How do I don't get to think about, oh, is that a leaf or is that a branch? No, the parts that are rotting need to rot and go away. They need to integrate into something else. They need to dissipate. How do I let what is corrupt die? How do I choose truth before reality grips me by the throat and the balls and starts to squeeze? Can I learn before pain shows up so strongly that I can't ignore it? Can I just choose to pay attention? I have this glimmer, this hint of, yes, this is really possible. I have some mental models that pop to mind, and some lived experiences in some very transcendental states that jump to mind. But the answer isn't a thought. It's not a theory. That's been the whole problem for me. I think. It's obvious to me that my mind has gotten in the way to some extent because my mind will produce these theories that are beautiful and intricate and maybe even partially right. And I'm staring at this map instead of looking up at the scenery that we're going through. Oh, yes, and then if we turn right at the next juncture, then we should come to a really beautiful site. Yeah, look at that. Are we through there? Yeah, I bet that looks amazing. Like, here's why it looks amazing, instead of looking up and looking out the window. Like that's been one of my big challenges through my life is bringing my mind's deep love of this kind of map making and map living into service to the living. I've made a lot of progress in that. But here I am looking at a situation of, I want to choose to learn from my mistakes before I make them. Because, and I think that that's quite possible because this is a place where I can feel the maps are very much in service, pointing directly at an experience here. There's the thing that brought me to my knees and in pain and rage and struggle from a couple of days ago. All of the patterns, all of the energy was in my body before that point. I was already uncomfortable before that point. What happened was reality smacked me in just the right way so that all of that pain became impossible to continue ignoring. So what I'm looking at is, if I had cultivated a particular type of awareness together with something like a type of care, and I mean care about, not just affection, although affection for this form, but like a care about, like to care about this pain, that this pain matters. Building this kind of sensitivity plus some kind of thing here that is, this matters. I have chosen. I don't know what that magic is. I have chosen. Okay. There's something there that would have allowed me to unroot, to choose to unroot all of those relationship patterns in me with as deep a devotion as I got from the pain, but without reaching the point of pain first. So for me, there's this edge, this lived edge, this thing of, I can feel it, I can taste it, and I have this absolute clarity that once I get this, once I fully get this, I can end my suffering. I can bleed off my karma. I can work through my karma consciously, intentionally, not just by, oh, I'm feeling a feeling, let me feel into that feeling. Okay, I'm feeling that. That's a tool. That's a tool. What is the choice to be free? What is the choice to really, truly, in some sense, be willing to die, to let everything that I was burn to the ground in service of truth? What is the choice to that absolute, unwavering, 1000% devotion to reality? I don't know how to choose that. But I can see exactly why being able to push that devote button, why pushing that devote button resolves everything about my internal experience and how that reacts out in terms of forming the world around me and creating the life that I want, but not the life that my ego thinks it wants, because that's part of what will be destroyed. Partly. And I can't necessarily predict with this mind which parts get destroyed ahead of time. Because if I could, it wouldn't be necessary. So that's a very lived edge for me. It's super lived. In my series of posts and videos back in August, I talked about the thing that I'm pointing at as the true free will. I've had experiences of this. It's something that I can feel into. In Hermetic Kabbalah, which is sort of, excuse me, it's something that one of the threads of Western mysticism picked up from Jewish mysticism. In the Hermetic Kabbalah, this is referenced as Gebura, sometimes translated as severity, but it's also force of will. It is the force of will that is beyond our normal identification as humans operating in a 3D world with time happening where we don't even think about it. It's just the water we swim in. There's a type of will that is vastly beyond the thing of, I'm now going to do my my New Year's resolution, and I'm going to try really hard. Okay, I'm feeling all this effort, and I'm feeling all this guilt, and I'm trying to stimulate my guilt to make myself work harder, and then it fails. Now I feel extra guilty, but I tried, and that was my willpower, and my willpower failed. It's like a bunch of machine pieces talking to each other in a loop. There's no intention there. There isn't something that cuts. There isn't the ferocity that burns and destroys, that which has its time to die having arrived. There's something like that. I can feel it very clearly. And I feel a little bit like a toddler who's just figuring out how to stand up, and in the process of figuring out how to stand up and kind of getting this wobbly balance, has discovered running. But it can't quite use it yet. And I'm not quite sure how it works, because these legs don't quite, I mean, how does that work? I'm on the ground again. What now? Like, like it's not a mental process. There's something evolving. There's something transforming in me. So I'm learning. I'm excited, and I am so confused. I feel like I am grappling with the question not at an intellectual level, but at a lived, embodied level. What is real free will? What is embodied free will? How do I choose to learn wisdom before I have to? I feel excited. And with that, I feel complete.